Hey, dude.
Da frick?
Hey, everyone. This is Chris, and you're listening to One Cross Radio. And today we are joined by the always awesome and intrepid producer extraordinaire, 1-2 combo of Nathan Marchand and Jimmy from NASA. Gentlemen, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. He's still really surprised that out of all the shows that keep wanting to have us on as guests, you're the only one who wants both of us.
Well, so the thing is, like, I have so much fun with both of you guys. And Jimmy, trust me when I say I haven't forgotten from when I was on the island last, and Nathan and I briefly talked about Star Wars, amongst many other things, as we were talking Gamera. You and I will have our discussion at some point about the pros and cons of the prequel trilogy, which for me have softened much over time. But that's for a different time. There's a reason I wanted you on for today as well, just because Nathan and I, dear listener, we've been, Nathan and I became friends a while ago, but we'll also text or message one another every once in a while when we're just watching a show, if we're getting into it. Like recently I've been listening to some audio dramas. I'm like, dude, you got to check this out. And then one day, I believe a month or two ago, I just messaged him and I'm like, you ever watch Beast Wars? This show is awesome. Like,
to which I said, of course.
And then when we were finally setting the date to do the episode, I was like, bring Jimmy, just because I feel like Jimmy would have some stuff to say. And also, in a weird way, just to add to the Jimmy mythology, I know his origin. I know Jimmy's story. And there's certain aspects of him that remind me a little bit of Dinobot, the good aspects of Dinobot. But Dinobot's awesome, period. But as we'll get into it in this episode, Dinobot also did some shady things. Let's be real. So I'm just like, we can't not have Jimmy here when we're going to be talking Dinobot, like his Predacon turned Maximal avatar, basically. Like, that's what I'm going for here.
Oh, he thought you wanted him on because there's a gorilla robot in this show, and he's fixing a gorilla robot at the moment.
Well, you know what? That works too, because then we can also get. I'm sure Jimmy's got a take, as we all should, on Optimus Primal in season 2, where that might be the most 90s thing I've seen in quite some time, where a gorilla suddenly becomes metallic purple and silver, and also flies around on a surfboard, like airboards around. I don't know if that one's aged quite well.
You want to know what I thought? You want to know what I thought was the most 90s thing in this show? It was Dinobot 2 and Transmetal 2 Cheetor. Both of those just screamed 90s edgelord. I'm sorry.
You know what? That's fair. That's fair. Cheetor especially. I'll be honest, and I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but Cheetor, a couple of the characters had multiple bodies or multiple versions or modes. I mean,
gotta get those new toys in.
Well, exactly. Like, as much as I will throw jokes at the larger Transformer community, lovingly, because I know so many people. I've got friends who are like, "Oh, Transformers was amazing." I was like, "Yours is a toy commercial. It's a giant toy commercial." And they're like, "What do you think Beast Wars was?" I'm like, "I know it's a toy commercial, but at least it dealt with some themes and did stuff well." And then you're like, okay, they're switching out the bodies because new toys to go, or certain characters never got translated because they didn't have it in the budget, or characters got written off because their toys weren't selling too well. That's what happened with Tigertron and Air Razor. Like, they were on a tight budget to begin with. Tigertron was chosen because the model was really close to Cheetor's anyway, so they could save some money.
Originally it was going to be the character Wolfang. I remember that toy. That was what they wanted, but we should probably give the listeners a little bit of a background. Beast Wars was a new line of toys that Hasbro produced for the Transformers line, where they all turned into animals. Now, there were animal Transformers before, because I grew up on G1, so I remember these things. But every Transformer in this turned into an animal, and they initially looked more like real animals as opposed to the stylized metallic, like Ravage, who famously turned into a tape deck for Soundwave. More stylized, but even though Ravage is supposed to be a panther. So, so it was a radical departure. It was, to be honest, probably a risky move on Hasbro's part. Well, they wanted to do a show that tied into it, and then they got a hold of a studio in your native Canada. Called Mainframe.
Who also did Reboot.
Yes, they had just done Reboot, which was I believe was technically the first CGI television series, entirely CGI television series.
So.
Yeah, so they were already well known for that.
There might have been one in France at a similar time, but I think Reboot came out just a little bit before it.
Yeah. So I'm guessing Hasbro talked to them and said, we want you to make a show based on this, and we want you to do it in your style using CGI, because that was the new big thing at the time. I think this show, started around 1995, which is right around the time of Toy Story. So CGI was becoming a big deal in terms of animation. And so, as you pointed out, because it wasn't just budget constraints, it was also constraints of the technology. Now, if this show was made now, every character in the entire toy line would probably be in it. But at this point, it was the animation was expensive to produce. Very. And so the creative team had to look at the toy line and decide, okay, which characters do we want to use for this show? Because they could really only have a handful of them. So it wasn't like the G1 cartoon and comic where, it's hand-drawn, so they could take that whole toy line and throw them in there. You could have a whole army and have an episode about a new character every week, every day, or whatever. They didn't have that luxury. And I think this is a testament to how limitations on creativity forces you to be even more creative. And because the writers on this show knew they only had a limited cast of characters that they could really use, it made them work on those characters and develop those characters and give them not only really distinct personalities and really strong characterization, because my gosh, even the, for lack of a better term, the grunt characters, the grunt bad guys have strong characterization in this show. It's astonishing.
1,000%.
Yeah. And so, and then not only that, but they also worked on their stories. They put in character arcs. There's so much stuff packed into this. And when you stop and think about it, this was a show that went 3 seasons, 52 episodes, and it is doing things that are remarkably clever and almost... It almost seems like the audience wasn't really kids. It was an older audience. I don't know exactly where to put it, because there's a lot of things in this that you have to think to yourself, why is this a kid's show? Because this show gets away with things nobody would think about getting away with now. Unless you're a Toonami original or something.
Well, I was going to say it's in a way very much a product of its time, in the best possible ways. The 90s was a weird time, a very weird time with our shows. I'm going to point to 2 other shows that were on the air at similar, or even a couple other ones that had varying degree of censorship or stuff that you were like, I can't believe this got in there. Spider-Man, the animated series that was on Fox in the 90s. Sorry. Yeah, no, Jimmy, you're totally right. Like, Spider-Man was like that because of a lot of the complaints due to the debatable excessive violence in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which in Power Rangers is later why they brought back Rita, because parents complained too much about Lord Zed. But a similar show on the same network, Batman the animated series, had guns, had punching, had a lot of heavy subject matter. You had
what?
Okay, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Gotta love it.
Yeah, but Jimmy, next time, make sure that Chris's mic, or just the guest mic in general, is primed correctly. Hey, watch your lip, boy. I don't appreciate that tone. Anyway, you were saying, Chris?
Yeah, all I was saying was the 90s is a weird time, was a wonderfully weird time. That's also reflected in the comics, and that not Beast Wars comics, just comic books in general.
Oh, geez. Don't get me started on Rob Liefeld.
Oh, I know. I was going to say when we said edgelord, but we're not going there.
And anything so also, by Image. Rob Liefeld and anything by Image. Oh. Pouches.
So, dear listener, I also realized I never mentioned how I got back to the island, and here's how. I recently got on, while I was on my Beast Wars kick, I gave a shot to a show that we never really got here in North America, especially in a wide release, which Transformers has always been successful in Japan. I mean, go figure.
It's a Japanese franchise. The history of Transformers is an interesting one, to say the least.
Well,
pretty much, it was a Japanese toy line that an American company got their mitts on and then created a mythology around it. Because in Japan, those figures don't have the character and the weight that they do. Or at least back in the 80s, they didn't. It was the Americans who built the whole mythology. But anyway, continue.
I was going to say, like, mine was just the joke of, look at all the stuff that comes out of Japan. All right, not all the stuff, just much of the stuff. And you'll see giant robots being a continual feature. So go figure, something with giant robots or animals that transform into robots being successful.
Yes, I know you wholeheartedly approve of Japanese giant robots being in everything.
Jimmy, I'm with you. If you gave me Bambi 3, Tokyo Drift, that suddenly featured a mecha Godzilla, not a mecha Bambi, because that's just a robot deer at regular size. And I mean, that's cool, but not next to Mecha Kong, or anything from Beast Wars.
He's correcting you and saying it's Mechana Kong.
Jimmy, you're right. I'm sorry. I knew as I said it I was wrong. But it was already out. It was too late.
I was waiting for Robot Kong. I have to find Robot Kong. Dig! I mean.
So how I got to the island today is, Nathan, you and I were talking earlier about how Beast Wars was, like, part of it was the budget, and not just for the characters, but because the show was so CG. Like, it was purely CG, that meant a lot of money was just going towards the environment, which some in the fan community have criticized as being too open. I found they made use of the space, especially as the seasons went on.
I want to say, I will say, viewing the show now, the animation is really dated, especially the environment. The characters look better than the environment. But I think that was on purpose, because that's where they focused, because this is a very character-driven show, so they got to make the characters look up. Plus, sell the toys.
Absolutely.
Because they were hyper-detailed with the toys. Like, I've actually read that the animators got the action figures, scanned the action figures into the computer, and were meticulous about making their character models transform like the toys. That's how meticulous they were. But all of that to say, yes, the animation looks dated, but if you can get past that, and I hope and pray people are able to, and not just write it off for surface level things, as we've already pointed out, this show is timeless because of its characters and its story and its voice acting, because the voice acting's top-notch. Everything else has 1000%. Aged amazingly well, except the animation. But you were saying.
Well, I think the animation is part of its charm. But yeah, I'll finish up with how I got here. There was a couple characters from the toy line that never made it into the show due to numerous budgetary reasons and toy sale concerns and blah blah blah. There was the toy named what was it? Was it Lockjaw? Or no, Clawjaw? Clawjaw.
I used to have that toy.
I remember you telling me. Clawjaw was a squid maximal. But where this ties into Japan is because Beast Wars was so successful. There were 2 Japanese exclusive Beast Wars sequel cartoon shows. A sequel in the loosest of sense. It's just,
the G1 cartoon had that too.
Yeah, it's a sequel in the loosest of sense of not that it picks up really any story elements. It's just, hey, here's Transformers that transform into beasts. Half of them do. The Predacons, for the most part, are machines, and they transform into machines, and I didn't care for that. But
that
there was a character
sense. I'm just saying.
Oh, I know. I didn't like that. But there was a character from Beast Wars 2 named Scuba that was also a squid transformer. That is how I got here.
Oh, you hitched a ride on Scuba.
I hitched a ride on Scuba. I was like, you know what, Scuba? I don't get your show fully, but also I like you, and I like your leader. I think it was Lionel, but no, that's not right. But it was a lion. And like it of course was a lion. But Scuba was cool. And there was also a couple other really cool characters from Beast Wars 2. So that's how I got here today to talk about Beast Wars. Now,
just Nathan, make sure the board doesn't know he's here, or they may attempt to capture him to keep him on the island, depending on how big he is.
Oh, he's pieced out a bit. He was also very aware of the island that we're coming from, and he didn't want. Zilla is here, right?
He's on the beta site, actually. No, wait. I take it back. He just got moved. He just got moved here. So, yes.
Yeah. So, I gave him that heads up, and he's like, all right, even though I'm a machine, I still might smell like something Zilla likes to eat. So, I'm going to drop you off and peace out, and then you're just going to signal me to come pick you up, and we'll be lickety-split.
Yeah, or he can hang out with Gazora. You know, they're close enough in species.
So, Nathan, how did you get introduced to Beast Wars?
Well, I actually, as I've already mentioned, I was a fan of the G1 cartoon growing up. I collected the toys, although I started collecting the toys when they got rebranded as Generation 2. And so I was collecting the toys for a while, and then there was the big shock of the toy line changing to all animals. It was a little weird at first, but I was willing to get into it. And the first one that I remember buying was actually a 2-pack in the first wave of toys. My brother and I don't remember if we bought it together, but we split the toys because it had Optimus Primal and Megatron. But in the first wave of toys, the figures were smaller, and Optimus was a bat, and Megatron was a crocodile. So it was a little strange. But the cool thing about it was this figure 2-pack, and I ended up getting Megatron and he got Primal, was it came with a mini comic book that explained things, the new mythology. But what was strange was in that initial wave of toys, they were supposed to be the characters from the previous line of toys. So this bat was somehow supposed to be Optimus Primal, who at one point was a drunk. It was very strange. But then the show came along, and then they made them separate characters, which was a very, very smart move. Now, the show, I actually found by accident. I just got up early one day. It was like 6:30 in the morning. Got around, did my morning routine, got breakfast. I don't remember all the details. I just know for sure that when I turned the TV on, it was already like 6:45. And I was expecting another show to be on, and lo and behold, it's the first episode of Beast Wars. But I'm halfway through it, so I don't know half of what's going on. I'm just like, wait a minute. This is a Beast Wars cartoon. I did not know this existed. And it's all CGI. And what is this? But I tuned in right when the Maximals and Predacons were all lined up to have their first big skirmish in the first episode. So I'm just trying to figure out what's happening right there. And then Dinobot shows up at the end. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have Dinobot. And, so it was a little strange. I had to get the full story later on when I saw a rerun. But the thing about the show initially, and I don't know what it was like for you in Canada, but here, Beast Wars was part of this kind of odd block of children's cartoons that would air during the week. I'm guessing either before or after school, because that's usually how these things worked. And it was called The Power Block. Ooh. There was actually an intro for this that was just for everything. They would play before the actual theme song for the show was stopped. It was like, powering up the power block. And then it would show clips of all the shows that were part of it. The thing that was silly was my local stations only aired Beast Wars, because the way it would work, it would be 2 episodes of Beast Wars on Monday and Tuesday, and then another show on Wednesday, and then another show Thursday and Friday. But only Beast Wars aired on my local stations. They never aired anything else that was part of this block. Now, I was aware of what those other shows were, and they have been forgotten in the mists of the 90s. I only remember what one of them was called. It was called Vortec, and it had something to do with cars, souped up cars, and weird 90s mutant supervillain things. That's all I can remember. If you want to research it, if this was my show, Jimmy would look that up for me, that sort of a stuff. But so I would watch Beast Wars, which I think is why the first season is twice as long as seasons 2 and 3, because the first season is 26 episodes, and then 2 and 3 are 13 apiece, because they had to make 2 episodes to air a week as opposed to 1.
Yeah. So in Canada, it was interesting, just because it would air on YTV, which if you were in the Toronto area and you had basic cable, it was channel 25.
I remember seeing that logo at the end of every episode during the credits.
Yeah. But then also, here's where it got interesting. It would also air on Fox Kids.
That was later.
28.
That was later.
Right.
I was about to mention because the thing that was annoying for me was the show was syndicated. And then for some odd reason, the last 5 or so episodes, I never got to see in syndication. I don't remember if I just missed them being aired, or if my local station just never aired them. But it frustrated me because I started watching Beast Machines, which is a whole other topic unto itself, but it's supposed to be a sequel. Nope. So it starts, and even though I heard the creators of the show said that we set it up so that you could have not seen Beast Wars and still get into it, I was at the worst possible point, because I was a fan of Beast Wars, and I started watching Beast Machines, and I was trying to figure out what the heck was going on, because I wanted to know how how did the characters end up where they are here? I'm confused.
I hated Beast Machines.
Beast Machines is a whole other, pardon the pun, animal.
We're just going to move on because I'm just going to bag it down.
But because that was a Fox show, that was on Saturday mornings, they reran Beast Wars during the week. Remember back when regular TV aired cartoons in the afternoons during the week?
Yeah.
Good times. But
okay,
so they would rerun Beast Wars then. So I just had to watch them all every week in order. So I want to see those episodes I missed, and then I finally got to see them. The problem with the Fox airings of the show was they censored them. Because I found out later that if you're a syndicated cartoon, the censorship, or rather the rules are more lenient. But if you're on network, there are more rules. So they got away with more because it was syndicated.
So the weird thing was, I remember in the 90s watching the show, and now I may have gotten them confused, but depending on which network I watched them on one network, it was called Beast Wars. On the other network, it was called Beasties, because apparently the Canadian name was, which was so stupid to me. Like, it's just dumb.
Fun fact, that was not the only mainframe produced show where they did that. There was another one, and I was a fan of this. What annoyed me was only the first season aired in the U.S., so I had to find other means to watch it later in life. But in the United States, it was called War Planets because that was the name of the toy line it was very loosely based on. But everywhere else in the world, it's called Shadow Raiders. I'm like, that sounds remarkably generic. Also, that's more in reference to the bad guys. Nice job.
So the thing with it being called Beasties was, it's like, no, well, Wars is too violent. Huh. You don't think all the explosions and gunshots in the title? Oh my gosh, dude.
Watching this show, well, not all of it, but handpicking what I thought were the best episodes of the show in anticipation of being of this episode. My gosh, no one would get away with this now. Nobody. No. Right, it's remarkably violent. The characters are brandishing guns all the time. It's like, were there a bunch of First Amendment guys from the United States that moved up to Canada to work for Mainframe? Because these characters are just flaunting their guns all the time, pointing them at each other, often putting the barrels of the guns on each other's heads and all kinds of things. It's like nobody would do this show now.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, I was going to say, just because we're running on a bit of a time crunch, let's jump into the show itself. It's got, as you alluded earlier, it's 3 seasons, and it is by all means a very violent show. Now, the weird thing is, I don't consider it too violent. It's violent in the sense of, they've got guns all the time, and at times it's played to comedic effect. There's what's probably the best episode of the show. You couldn't have done that story without violence, and that's the season 2 episode Code of Hero.
Oh, my gosh.
Transformers fan community. Here's the thing. I will bag on G1 Transformers, but lovingly. To me, the thing is this, like, as much as it can be, there was a whole uproar in the early 90s, like, truck not monkey, or whatever, which was just dumb.
The irony of it was originally the show wasn't intended to be part of the G1 continuity, but the fans that were of the G1 fans who were watching the show were talking to the creators on message boards and giving them ideas about how to tie it into the show, into the continuity, and they started working those in there because the creators admitted, we don't necessarily know a whole lot about G1 Transformers, so which
was a really cool thing to do. Like, to tie in Starscream was kind of cool in season 1.
That's actually one of my favorite episodes. Possession is what it's called.
Bringing in Ravage towards the end of season 2.
Another one of my favorite episodes.
I love it. It's so much fun, and especially that he's just randomly really, really Russian was a blast. Like,
I don't
care.
No
explanation for it whatsoever. You're just like, you know what? This works I'm here for it.
In Mother Russia, panthers turn into tapes. You did not know this.
And I love that when he turned into the tape, you got the classic sound effects and everything.
Yes.
So the first season is the one where I'm like, that's where I look at that one as more so, at least the first chunk of it, as a bit of the kids show. It's still figuring out what it is. Like, as much as I'll be like, your Transformers was a toy commercial, mine had deep stuff like Code of Hero. It did also have farting robots. Which,
thank God that was only one episode, and I don't remember what that's called, but it's, for me, the worst episode of the show.
When the Energon builds up and there's farts, I'm like, right, I'm watching.
Not only that, show. But it was something that they had been building toward the entire episode, and apparently Rhinox has flatulence that qualifies as a WMD.
Yeah.
Because that's how they defeat the bad guys at the end of that one. And I was not fond of it when I saw it the first time, and I have it has never been appealing to me. That is the worst episode of the show. But it's and I think the first season of Beast Wars not only has the usual TV show, growing pains of figuring out itself, figuring out the characters, but because it was 26 episodes, there's filler. Essentially filler, kind of one-off episodes. But there's also, and this is one of the things that I actually love about the show, is that, and it's not something that you typically saw, especially, let alone in children's shows, was serialized storytelling that has an ongoing plot line. In this case, there's a third party besides the Maximals and Predacons.
Yep.
You don't find out what they're called until their final episode. They're called the Vok. V-O-K, the Vok. They're these aliens that have their own agenda going, and the Maximals and Predacons are messing with it, and they hate both of them because of it. Because, spoiler warning, people, I should explain this. The setup of the show was initially the crew of Maximals that we see are chasing down these rogue Predacons, and the Maximals and Predacons are descendants. This is how they tie it to G1. They are the descendants of the Autobots and Decepticons, respectively, and it's 300 years after the G1 continuity. So it's 300 years later in that continuity. They chase them down because they stole an important artifact. They go through what they call transwarp, and then they have a battle, they shoot each other down, and now they're engaging in, no pun intended, guerrilla warfare with each other over lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And and then you find out later that when they went through this transwarp, that they not only traveled through space, they traveled through time, and they are on ancient Earth. Hence why they are finding alternate modes that look like animals. I'm surprised they didn't figure this out until later, but I guess their records on Earth wildlife was spotty.
So when I watched the show recently, because I watched it through, they planted a lot more seeds about being Earth than I remembered. And the reason they did that, they were like, we're not sure that we're going to be allowed to make this Earth. So we added the extra moon as the backup. And then when we got the okay, they were like, okay, we're going to destroy this just to make it known.
And that's the genius of this. There is so much foreshadowing. I mean, I have to tell you, watching this show again, it dawned on me not only how much I love it, but also how much, honestly, I feel like there are many things about this show that have seeped deep into my soul, and I carry them with me to this day. It's astonishing, to be honest. And the serialized storytelling is great with that. So there are some really nice high points in season 1. And to be honest, the high points, most of the high points in season 1 for me are either when they're doing stuff with the intrigue and mystery of the Vok and what they're doing, because they're conducting experiments from a distance on what's essentially ancient Earth. You find that they're responsible for things like Stonehenge, and then there are things where they use some symbols that are kind of part of, conspiracy theory circles and things like that kind of hint at, them being these ancient aliens and doing things, because I know that's part of conspiracy theories. Or the episodes that have some sort of tie-in with the G1 continuity, like Possession, where the ghost of Starscream takes control of Waspinator.
Yeah. So with season 1, I find my favorite episodes, especially when they excel, are towards the back half of the season. Towards the end, they really, like, the serialized storytelling gets in the zone, and they're really amping up for, they don't know if they're going to get continued. So that's also, each season, it's like seasons 1 and 2 ended on a note where the good guys lose, and they're like, "This could be it." We don't know.
That's one of the other things that's bold about this show. It was there were a few times. I mean, it looks like the good guys lose in the season 1 and 2 finales, but there was actually an episode called The Probe, which is one of the ones I rewatched, where the good guys lose. They just flat out lose. Now, the thing is that if they had won, then the show would have been over. Because in that one, they find out that a Cybertron had sent a probe to follow them, and if they find them, that means they'll get rescued. Well, they can't get a signal to the probe unless they set up a relay station, which they try to defend, and then the Predacons screw that up, and then in the end, they blow the thing up, and the probe never finds out that they were there. So if they had been found, that would have ended the show. Now, there's a really great moment in this, because we've talked about it with Dinobot, and I think we need to let's just get on to, let's talk about the season first, and we'll get back to Dinobot. But there's a nice moment with Dinobot that becomes part of his development as a character, because what happens is he was one of the Predacons, didn't get along with Megatron. Megatron got rid of him with a rock. Scorponok got rid of him with a rocket to the face. and then he ends up defecting to the Maximals. So there's a point where he says, "Oh yeah, this is great for you, but if Cybertron comes, they're going to call me a criminal, and God only knows what they're going to do to me." And Primal tries to tell him, "Don't worry, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen," and he doesn't believe him, and that becomes a through line for him. So there was that, and then I do think episodes like The Trigger, which was a 2-parter, about halfway through it, that one was really good, where they had the floating island, and they did more stuff with the Vok, and that actually has a very interesting ending, because by the end of it, the floating island gets destroyed, because the Black Arachnia tries, and also Megatron was trying to do it too, try to take it over because of the power and weaponry that the thing had. Well, it ends up crashing, and that was a Tigertron-focused episode. And Tigertron is a pacifist. He's very in touch with nature. He doesn't like war and that sort of thing. And when the island crashes, Tigertron says, "We were given a paradise, but we proved unworthy." And then Optimus Primal adds, "It's an old story. Maybe we'll learn someday." And I'm thinking, why don't you just call it the Garden of Eden? That's what this is. It's the Garden of Eden. It's talking about the fall. It's talking about being expelled from paradise. That's what this is. Thank you.
So that actually made me think of, when you brought up Black Arachnia and Dinobot, one of the things this show did so well that made it so interesting was it didn't just have clear-cut good guys and bad guys. There were some that were always on the side of good, who would unquestionably be on the side of good, but there were a number of characters where the tides and sides were almost ever changing.
Well, and I mean, even the actual,
he betrayed them,
yeah,
and then he went back to the Maximals. Black Arachnia, midway through the second season, like, the Spiders always operated on their own terms,
yes,
but still somewhat subservient to Megatron. But then Black Arachnia, midway through season 2, when Silverbolt showed up, especially in the episode where the Hannibal Lecter of Transformers Rampage shows up.
Oh my gosh.
Which was a great, horrifying episode. Loved it.
Bad Spark, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, Bad Spark. That's where they started having her. You started to sow seeds of like, is she going to go to the good side? And she eventually did. Silverbolt was with the Predacons for a while, but he was deliberately like super duper chivalrous. So you knew he wouldn't stay
he had
there
been lied to. That was the thing.
Yeah,
because this is an element, and we should bring this up. This is an element of of Transformers mythology that this show introduced. It's a couple of them. One is protoforms and one is sparks. Now, sparks had kind of been hinted at in G1, but this really solidified it. Essentially, a spark is a Transformer's soul. And then they also introduced what are called protoforms, which were... I'm a little confused about how it's supposed to work, because I thought that if they were in escape pods and that was the actual maximal crew and stuff like that, but they play around with it. But essentially, it's it's like a primordial form for a Transformer, and then because that becomes a thing. Whenever one of those pods crashes, then they all go like, "Oh, look, a new friend! We need to go get them," because new character is going to show up, and then. Then a lot of times they have things malfunction. And then sometimes they'll do things where they'll malfunction and things don't work out quite as well. And they did that with Silverbolt, where he couldn't remember when he came out of the pod who he was or what his allegiance was. So Megatron convinces him he's a Predacon. But then later on, he figures out, I'm not a Predacon. Screw you.
That intro scene was so funny just because you've got Quick Strike, who's a very enjoyable, like, one-note character, who's clearly
like I said,
a bad
even
guy.
the one-note characters have strong characterization. That's what I love about this.
Inferno, I love, but his character
for the glory
as, like,
of the royalty,
a yelling ant, like that.
A
Inferno
fire ant.
In his first
Get it right,
episode,
fire ant.
a yelling fire ant. In Inferno's first episode, when I rewatched it, I was like, he yells so much more than I remember. Like, you remember the stuff like, my queen, for the royalty, for the colony. Yeah. But he just goes like,
yeah.
So much. And it's entertaining.
Yes. But as I was saying...
Like, all the characters, even when they're one note, on top.
Yes. But as I was saying, what was I saying? I suddenly can't remember.
But in that episode, when they introduced it, just Megatron being Megatron, like, manipulator.
Now I remember.
Even strike away, but then he's like, we're a happy family. And then they do the family pose.
Yeah. Well, no, now I remember. Even the characters who are the actual good guys, the writers on the show were not afraid to make them a bit rough around the edges, give them actual imperfections that become part of their character. I'm thinking most especially of Rat Trap.
Yeah.
Rat Trap, actually, it's funny. You look at Rat Trap as he progresses from episode 1 to the final episode, and there's actual development for him. Before, he was incredibly sarcastic, incredibly cynical. He didn't follow orders half the time. Because if he thought, I'm not doing that if it means I'm going to get killed. And, and now he kept that sarcastic, cynical edge throughout the entire show. But he was much more willing as the series progressed to, to not, disobey orders and to look out for his comrades and his friends and things like that. And I thought that was a really nice development for him. He also had some of the best lines in the entire show. And some of the best moments in the entire show.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, his whole sequence at the end of the season 2 finale, where he single-handedly, like, takes out Ravage's ship and uses Ravage's ship to take out Tarantulas and Rampage.
That was amazing. I try to remember what he said, because he had like the most action movie of worthy of lines when he did that.
Oh yeah,
it was great. But his catchphrase
you
was,
tell when everybody was having so much fun on this show.
Yes,
and that was one of those moments where you're like, everybody is enjoying this.
Well, and the other thing was. What's funny, since we're talking about several of these characters already, but there was one guy who he was kind of the Frank Welker of the show. I don't know if you're familiar with Frank Welker. He's voiced everything, but Frank Welker voiced a bunch of characters in G1, including Megatron, Soundwave, and several others. And then in this show, you had a guy named Scott McNeil, who I think at one point was, for a few episodes, was technically voicing half the cast. Because he was Dinobot, he was Rat Trap, he was Silverbolt, and he was Waspinator.
Yep.
So there means there are scenes where he is talking to himself. And I would love to see video of him recording, because I really want to think, like, did he just sit there and do both characters at the same time? So every time Dinobot and Rat Trap are butting heads, is he just switching voices and characters at the same time? Because that would be stupendous.
I hope so. Well, and there's the great story from when Dinobot died, like, people are laughing in the background, like other people.
Yeah, he's recording it. This is a purported story. Like, I don't know if this is entirely true. Yeah. And yeah, I'm sorry, I talked over you there. I'm sorry. But
it's okay.
Scott McNeil is recording Dinobot's final words. And apparently people are laughing while he's doing it. And he got so annoyed with them that he started yelling at them, but he didn't break character. And supposedly he stopped reading his lines and he looked at everybody, and I'm going to do a terrible impersonation here, but do you mind? I'm trying to die here.
You know what? You could hear the Dinobot in that.
But let's talk about Dinobot, because Dinobot is by and large my favorite character on the show. I mean, how is he not everybody's standout character? I was going to say, how is he not everybody's favorite character? He's essentially a Shakespeare quoting Klingon who turns into a velociraptor. What more do you want? I mean, that's the cool thing. Especially once you get to
make a further
season
Star
2,
Trek
he's quoting Shakespeare all over the place.
To make a further Star Trek connection, he is Worf from DS9, in the sense of he doesn't get shot down all the time or thrown across the room automatically to establish how strong the villain is. Worf in DS9 gets a lot more respect than he did on TNG.
Yeah, but that was the thing. And what made
hints of Martok.
But what made Dinobot fascinating from the get-go, before the Shakespeare stuff, which just made the lit nerd in me, squee with delight. Shut up, Jimmy. Was he didn't really belong to either of these camps. And that was what was fascinating. He had too much honorability to be a Predacon. And he was still too rough around the edges to really be a Maximal. And that's why, honestly, his duel with Primal in the beginning of the second episode so clearly establishes his character, because he challenges Primal to a duel for leadership. And then they fight, and he has an opportunity to win because Primal loses his balance and is barely hanging on to the stone bridge that they're fighting on. And instead of just kicking him off, which any other Predacon would do, he grabs him and throws him back onto the bridge. And Primal even says, "You'd won. Why did you do that?" And then you get this line that honestly I think embodies the character, which is, he said, "To defeat you in such a way would be lacking in honor. I prefer to finish my opponents the old-fashioned way, brutally." And then they start fighting again. And it's so brilliant. It is so brilliant. And so then there's this through line where every time the Maximals think they're going to get rescued, he's telling them, "I don't think I want to be rescued because I'll be labeled a criminal, and God only knows what will happen to me," like I mentioned earlier. And so that's something he has to wrestle with. And then for the first half of season 2, he's wrestling. He knows things about the golden disc, the MacGuffin of the show, and starts figuring out its secrets and starts wondering, do I want to remain with the Maximals or do I want to go back to Megatron? He's wrestling with that. And then there's a episode where he makes his decision and he stays with the Maximals, but then at least a few of the Maximals, Rat Trap in particular, doesn't trust him. He even tells him at the beginning of Code of Hero, with everybody else, I know where they stand. He's taking these shots at him, and and Dinobot has to wrestle with all of this. He wrestles with a lot of things. My gosh, that episode actually starts with it strongly implying he's essentially going to commit seppuku, which, for those who don't know, is ritual suicide in Japan, commonly practiced by the samurai back in the day.
Yep.
He doesn't go through with it, and they don't really say that's what he's going to do. But if you know how it works, that's what he's doing. He was so torn, so ashamed that he almost went that far. It's astonishing what they wanted to do, what they did.
And also how they had him struggle with destiny and does he have choice? Does he have free will? This show, even though it was designed like it was a kid's show and you could say a toy commercial, hear me out. I'm not trying to just bag on Gen 1, but I got the tail end of Gen 1. I got the cartoon. I got the movie. You didn't get anything like this in Gen 1. You didn't get these heavy themes. Their Beast Wars sometimes doesn't just serve you fun action stuff. If we're going with the food metaphor, it gives you a 4-course meal. It gives you a full-on steak. It's you were expecting popcorn. I'm giving you this, and you're going to digest this. You got to figure this out, and that's where I appreciate kids shows or any show that gives you stuff to think about. But when I was little, I didn't think I'd have a podcast later because podcasts weren't a thing then. But also, I didn't think I'd be sitting here 25 some odd years later being like, oh my gosh, this gets deep.
Yeah.
They're struggling with destiny, with right and wrong, with forgiveness, with letting revenge go, like Depth Charge. When Depth Charge shows up in season 3, he's a fun character. He starts off as that one-note character, and he carries some of that Dinobot energy a little bit, but he's also singularly focused on revenge. And then towards the end of season 3,
very much got a Captain Ahab thing going. Yeah,
but it's that's not stuff you generally get with other kids shows. So that's the thing that I love about Beast Wars that I wish would carry on into so much. And for me, that's why it's the high mark of Transformers that I haven't seen matched yet. We can look at it nostalgically where there's all that, but I think there's so much meat on this bone that I'm like, oh my gosh, this show is deeper in a weird way than it has any right to be. But I love when shows do that.
Yeah.
Because it could have easily just been a cartoon commercial. Or not a cartoon commercial, a toy commercial. It honestly could have been. And I still would have eaten it up in droves because I'm the target audience at that time. At that time, I'm looking like, Cheetah turns into robot and go boom. Yeah. That's fun. Yeah. But now you're just like, holy cow.
I want to park here at Code of Hero for a little bit. Because this was, it's technically...
Just a heads up, I do got to get going in 10, 15 minutes.
That's fine. But I just want to park here for a minute.
Yeah, no, of course.
The Code of Hero is technically the centerpiece of the show if you're just looking at it in terms of seasons. And this was the culmination of a lot of things, in particular Dinobot's story.
Oh, yeah.
And the big thing that happens, and this is from a Christian perspective, is the only black mark I can hold against it, and that is that it's steeped in evolution, because we have Cro-Magnon men or whatever. They're in this valley, And Megatron has figured out by looking at the golden disc that humanity is going to spring from this valley. And the humans helped the Autobots win the Great War beforehand. And that is now why the Predacons are subservient to the Maximals. So he decides, I'm going to destroy this valley and kill everything in it. And then humanity will never have existed, and the Decepticons will win the war in the future.
Yep.
Dinobot figures this out, and he's the only one there who can stop it. And you have this moment where he realizes,
so good.
I am the only one who can do anything about this right now. And there is this brilliant shot of him standing on the top of a cliff face. He's got the sunset behind him, which should... I mean, there's already several little things in this episode that telegraph that death is coming. And this is one of them. He is standing he's standing silhouetted against the sunset, so the sun is going down. So that's symbolic of the oncoming death, his oncoming death, I should say. And he goes into this little speech that, in terms of how it's edited, it seems like it's coming immediately after he tells the rest of the Maximals on their little radio that, you know, he's not going to wait for them. So I don't know if they heard this or if it's just, weird editing. But he goes into this little speech, and I'm going to read it for you right now. He says, "The question that once haunted my being has been answered. The future is not fixed, and my choices are my own. And yet, how ironic, for I now find that I have no choice at all." And then this line gets me every time, man. "I am a warrior. Let the battle be joined." I'm getting chills reading this right now.
Yeah,
it sounds weird that I'm getting chills reading lines from a cartoon character.
And also from a cartoon about machines that animals that turn into machines.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah.
When you start applying the layers of Transformers and the Beast Wars, and don't get me wrong, I'm not doing it to minimize it at all, because I love this property. But you're just like, you see how this is more, like, in a way, in that loving way, more and more ridiculous. So you're just like, this shouldn't be here, but this chill-inducing, fantastically deep line that would make so much sense in, like, a Serizawa samurai drama epic is smack dab there.
Yeah. And then after that, Dinobot single-handedly takes on every single one of them. Well, except Tarantulas. He took Tarantulas out already. But he goes through and he just starts systematically dismantling, sometimes literally,
and
every single one of these bad guys.
Inferno might be the most brutal. Just the sword.
Yeah, I'm telling you, we've been talking about how violent this show gets. I'm telling you right now, there are moments of violence in the show. If that had been real people, it would have been an R-rated show. It would have been on HBO, and that was the only way you could see it.
It would have been. It would have faced challenges getting from an NC-17 down to an R.
Probably, but they're robots, so we can get away with it. Some
of this stuff you could be like, I could see Tarantino going for this.
Yeah. So he starts going through and starts dismantling all of them. Then you actually have one of my all-time favorite lines in the entire show, because this is I don't care what anyone says, this is the best version of Megatron anywhere in Transformers. Fight me.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yep.
1,000%.
Hold on. You're going to take me up on that offer? Fine. G-Man beat you once already, although you were drunk, so that's neither here nor there. Anyway, this Megatron is absolutely amazing, and the voice acting for him is great, and they give him some amazing dialogue. And this is probably my favorite line from him, which is he's watching Dinobot take out all of his troops except for one. And then he says, "One lowly turncoat battling on against impossible odds. I'm almost touched." Fortunately, such moments pass quickly.
They gave Megatron so much material. Like, I watched the series finale of Beast Wars earlier today, and he's looking down at the valley. He sees the anthropoid, or whatever we're calling it, the little monkey thing. And he's just like, this huge ship. It should almost be like, this should be beneath my notice, but no score is too small to settle. And then he just fires the ship at it, killing 2 of his own troops in the process, showing how little he cares for anyone.
Yeah, he is a true Machiavellian. He's got schemes inside of schemes. He plans for everything. I mean, he's a brilliant villain. In his first season, would also brush the teeth of his Tyrannosaurus head. I know.
And had a rubber duck.
This show has a weird sense of humor. But what I like about it is that it's kind of quirky, often goofy sense of humor. Most of the time doesn't detract from the gravitas of what's going on.
It weirdly fits with it. And that's where I find it strikes that balance of like, this is how you balance it all out as, for all intents and purposes, a kid's show. Like, after all the grand speeches and all that, we have Megatron talking to his rubber ducky.
Yes.
It strikes that balance.
Yeah.
And it strikes it well.
Yeah. So anyway, then Megatron goes down there. He gets involved himself. Dinobot is able to defeat him. And then he destroys the golden disc with the last of his energy. And then the Maximals all arrive, and the Predacons retreat. And then that last scene, dude.
Oh, yeah.
I dare anybody to watch the show up to that point and not be moved. It is weird. It is weirdly moving.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, it's even better because, again, Dinobot quotes Shakespeare. I believe it is Othello. And it is the absolute best way for his story to end. Let me see if I can find it, because it should be shared. He says, tell my tale to those who ask. Tell it truly, the ill deeds along with the good, and let me be judged accordingly. The rest is silence. Absolutely
and then
brilliant.
He dies.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's just, I can't praise it enough. I really can't.
Yeah.
Now, here's a question I have for you. Do you think the fact that they introduced an evil Dinobot clone in season 3, does that rob this character and this story of anything?
No.
Because they did that?
No. To me, I think bringing back Dinobot in season 3 ties in more so to Megatron's story. Megatron was upset, like, clearly throughout the show, so hurt. Like, as much as he doesn't care about anybody else, like, he felt betrayed that Dinobot left him. Like, Dinobot was the one that he had this weird kinship with. Like, when Dinobot was coming back to the Predacons in that episode where he was toying with the idea, he was trying to figure out whether or not he was going to do that. Megatron was, like, open to it but guarded, and then hurt when Dinobot betrayed him again. So coming up with a clone of Dinobot that would be totally subservient to him, like, it was his mission. And then in the finale, where they didn't, this is the only glaring part, I'd say, or not glaring part, my criticism of the third season is there was at one point possibly going to be an episode called Dark Glass, where it was going to be Rat Trap after Dinobot 2 was created, was going to try to install a backup, try anything to bring his friend back. And it wasn't going to take until the finale when Rampage died and then Dinobot got the full spark. That would somehow trigger the memories of the original Dinobot coming back. But that episode didn't happen. So in the finale as it stands, when Rampage dies, for some unknown reason, aside from, well, we want this, Dinobot's memories start to come back, and when he drops Honor towards the end, Megatron gets pissed. And he's like, I created you. I did this. Like, what possible reason do you have to disobey me? And that there is, I'm like, that's why. Even though Dinobot 2, in the end, they make Dinobot 1, I don't think Dinobot 2 takes away from Dinobot 1 at all. Because they are, even though in some ways they're the same character, they're also for very different purposes. And it ties in strictly to Megatron's, where, yeah, Megatron is nuts. I could totally believe, like, if the show had kept going, it wouldn't have surprised me if eventually Tarantulas be dead. Like, he eventually tries to bring back a subservient Tarantulas. Like, I'd have no doubt that eventually he's like, I'm the ruler. I'm taking away y'all's will. Like, I'm the dictator. It just seems like something that he would do. So that's my long-winded answer of saying no.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that you bring this up. I've been trying to find it. It's something that I remember reading a long time ago, but there actually was an unproduced episode that centered around Dinobot 2. I forget what it was called. The script got written, and it more or less would have entailed, I believe it was Rat Trap, diving into Dinobot 2's head and kind of discovering vestiges of the original Dinobot still in him and finding out that there's still, to use the Star Wars terminology, there's still goodness in him, and which would have foreshadowed his turn in the finale. Unfortunately, the script didn't get animated because it was deemed too dark.
Yeah.
And they ended up replacing it with the little Rat Trap Depth Charge Buddy Cop episode that was more comical in nature. So that's unfortunate. I think if you tracked it down somewhere on the internet, you might actually be able to read the script. So I would be curious to see what it was like.
There's also, if you Google search Dark Glass, it does show up on the Transformers fandom. Well, yeah, Dark Glass. I don't have a chance to read the full article now, because it also seems like there's been a couple different takes on the script that have come up over the years. And at points it's been either the producers have commented on it. At one point they said it was too dark. Another producer said the script, like, there were parts that were interesting, but the rest of the script wasn't up to snuff. So there's a couple different things, but it sounds like there was this there was going to be this thing, and I would have loved that episode. As unfortunately, I got to get going in a minute. So as we come to a close, before I hop on Scuba to head back to Canada land,
that sounds like a very weird theme park. I'm just saying.
Well, it's cold and things are chaotic here right now, so I'm just going to go with Canada land. So who would you say outside of Dinobot, because clearly he's both of our favorite characters?
Yeah.
What would you, if you could, who would you say are your other favorite characters, and what are some of your favorite episodes, my good man?
Megatron, for sure. Absolutely brilliant villain. Highly quotable. Highly quotable. Yeah. His catchphrase was, yes. And I have been known to say that in a very Megatron sort of way. Yes. Fun fact, David Kaye, who voiced Megatron, originally auditioned to be Primal.
Oh, wow.
And then ended up being Megatron, and I think he was better for it. Although, also fun fact, in one of the more recent Transformers cartoons, I forget which one, I think it was Transformers Animated or something, he got to voice Optimus Prime, so he got his chance later. But all that being said, I'm also a big fan of Optimus Primal. The thing that's really cool about Primal compared to Optimus Prime is Optimus Prime, for a lot of kids back in the 80s, which was why his death in the movie would hit way harder than anybody thought it would, was because he was like a father. to all of the other characters. He was the leader, yes, but he became this father figure to a lot of kids, and I think he was written that way as well. Primal is less a father figure and more like the intrepid captain of a starship trying to keep his crew in line, which is a very nice contrast. So I like that about Primal.
Was a flawed leader.
Yeah, he's the squad leader.
Yeah.
And I love Rat Trap because he's so sarcastic and cynical, and he plays off of the other characters really well. He's a bit of a wild card. He's really fun in that regard. And trying to think, trying to think of another Predacon that I really... Black Arachnia was really interesting because she went through a very interesting story arc because she kind of defected, but it wasn't quite the same as Dinobot. And then she actually has one of my favorite episodes is when she makes her complete turn, both in every sense of the word, because it was physical, as mental, and to be honest, kind of spiritual as well, when she becomes a Transmetal 2. And fun fact, that episode was written by D.C. Fontana. Does that name sound familiar to you, sir?
Yes, it does.
This is
trying to figure out.
She was a prolific Star Trek writer.
There we go.
There were some very talented people who worked on the show. D.C. Fontana was one of them. They also had Mark Wolfman. And a couple of people that I found out later wrote for Babylon 5. So there's quite the muscle in the writing department on this show.
Yeah.
So
this show is so good.
Yeah. And for me, it really starts to take off once more the G1 stuff comes in. The big turn is in one of my other favorite episodes. It was a 3-parter called The Agenda, where they find out not only are they on ancient Earth, but they have learned the location of the Ark, which was the ship with all of the Autobots and also some Decepticons from the original show. So that made me excited as someone who grew up on the original show. And now Megatron wants to destroy it, and he just about does, because he essentially assassinates Optimus Prime while he's sleeping. Jerk. And they have to scramble to fix it. Yeah, they have to scramble to fix him to keep this time storm from wiping out the timeline. And, which has a lot of interesting consequences. And then they spend all of season 3 defending that ship to make sure Megatron can't do that.
Yep.
And
then, of course, they get another toy out of Optimus in that. Yeah. And then later Megatron.
Yes. It took them a little while. I do feel, and that's the thing, I feel like season 2 is really the show at its peak. That season is very lean. It's very focused. And every episode has weight. Season 3 is not quite as strong. In large part, not so much that it had filler. I mean, there's 1 or 2 episodes you could probably say are filler. But it's more because the last few episodes feel a little bit rushed. Like they're trying to scramble to get everything done. They gotta wrap everything up as quickly as they can. But and that's when they introduce, because they introduce a new character within the last 3 episodes.
Tigerhawk, and then he's killed.
To pay off the fact that Tigertron and Air Razor got taken away by the Vok. So there's this hanging thread of what happened to them? Are we going to save them? Are we ever going to get them back? And then they're like, yeah, you do. And we'll make them into one character. He'll be really cool, and he'll die 2 episodes later. Thanks.
Yep.
And Waspinator was fun. He's a one-note character, and he ends up becoming the comic relief. He didn't start off that way. He became that because one of the things that the show was known for is the fact that he's kind of like Kenny from South Park. He gets destroyed almost every episode.
When they got to season 2, they were told they had 3 options of Predacons they had to kill off: Pterosaur, Scorponok, or Waspinator. Now, apparently the producers didn't have them as much love for Waspinator as the fans did, but they were like, we can't kill Waspinator. The fans will kill us. So that's why Waspinator stayed because of the fan love for the character. They were like, we probably have more story opportunity with Pterosaur or Scorponok. And then they included like the transmetal shine on them as they were sinking in case they ever had the chance to bring them back. But they were like, we can't kill Waspinator. Like, we can't kill Waspinator. We'll get killed. Like, Waspinator was loved. And then they amped up the comedy with him, especially season 2 onwards. But I find that Waspinator is the best Waspinator. Yeah.
And then I think it's appropriate that the show actually ended with Waspinator.
Yeah.
Like the final shot, the final scene of the show, after all the other characters who survived are flying away to go back to Cybertron. It goes back to Waspinator, who is the only Predacon other than Megatron to survive. And he is essentially now the king of the proto-humans. And the final line of the show is, Waspinator happy at last. And then that gets mucked up by Beast Machines. So,
oh yeah. All right. Before we go, I'm going to quickly share some of my favorite characters. Aside from Dinobot, definitely Megatron, Rat Trap. I loved Tigertron. Rhinox was really, really cool. Inferno. One note, but a fun one note. Tarantulas is probably like one of the most fascinating characters because they have so much wiggle room with him.
Oh yeah, he was another wild card because you find out that he's actually a mole. And I don't mean that literally. I mean he's a spy for the Predacons.
Yeah.
Because Megatron's a rogue.
Depth Charge was a lot of fun.
I wished he had been used more, to be honest.
No, that's fair. That's fair. As I was watching the 3rd season recently, I'm just like, I like this character. I like the performance, but it was also, I think it was that issue of they probably figured out partway through the 3rd season, like, oh, okay, we're done. Like they decided to do Beast Machines, and the team that did Beast Wars didn't all carry over to Beast Machines,
especially in the writing department. But yeah,
exactly. So if he could have, I would have loved to see more done with him. But with what we got, I still enjoyed the character.
Also, a bit of a wild card. So
yeah. Well, especially in those early episodes. As we go with some episodes, I'll say the final 3 from season 1, Before the Storm, Other Voices 1 and 2, a great 3-part like serialized storytelling.
Actually, I would argue it's a 6-parter. I didn't realize, because when you get to Before the Storm, the major plot elements that start in Before the Storm don't resolve until 3 episodes into season 2.
No, and that's fair. That's fair.
It's amazing.
Yeah, no.
To be honest,
oh, yeah,
like this 6-part really story almost.
I was going to say Aftermath, like the first episode of season 2, is a great pickup into the coming of the Fusors, which also have fun with what they're doing. You get some like Western stylized stuff, and then of course,
I know. That was the other thing that was fun about this show, is that they would have episodes that would kind of have one-off styles, and Coming of the Fusors did that, where it had some Western elements in it.
Bad Spark, which got like horror movie-esque at points.
There's a serious amount of body horror in this show at points. I'm thinking particularly of Feral Scream when Cheetor is changing into a Transmetal 2. Holy crap! There's some nightmare fuel in those episodes.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm even thinking of, especially in Bad Spark, when they come up, like Tarantulas is found by Rampage. He screams, and then they come across Tarantulas in pieces later. Now, this is a show where body parts go flying because of explosions, because they're shot and stuff, but that's not what happened to Tarantulas here, and you know it, and it's messed up. That's followed by the highlight of the entire series, of course, Code of Hero. The 3-part finale of season 2, The Agenda of 1, 2, and 3, is a great 3-parter. I enjoyed the first episode, Optimal Situation, Depth Charge Introduction episode, Deep Metal is a good one.
Yeah. I wrote a devotion based on Optimal Situation, actually.
Nice. I got to check that one out. And then, of course, the finale, Nemesis Parts 1 and 2,
which is credit where credit is due. They actually gave the Decepticon ship a name in Beast Wars.
Yeah.
It was unnamed in the original show, which I think is interesting.
And it's one of the great things they've added. All right, so dear sir, unfortunately, I got to catch Scuba back to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you so much for joining me. And I feel like we could do this again. I feel like there's a lot more.
Easily.
As we were talking, I'm just like, there's so much meat on this bone. So we're going to revisit this topic.
I would be more than happy to do so. Oh, you're in Jimmy's good graces. He would be more than happy to have you come back.
Absolutely. Well, Jimmy, dude, I like you a lot, so I'm loving that it's feeling reciprocated, and that's great. So, yes. All right. So we will definitely do this again, and we can talk about this more. We can talk about it more in depth, or do multiple episodes. But, dear listener, I hope out of this it gave you inspiration, if nothing else, to revisit the show. I really recommend it, and Nathan does too. It's a deep show with a lot of stuff, a lot of meat on the bone, a surprising amount. And I hope you revisit it. And in a way, I also hope this kind of inspires you to go back to other shows, but not just thinking, oh, it's this, like writing it off before we get to it. We all have that tendency. I was surprised when revisiting Beast Wars on this most recent run through, just how much foreshadowing there was. And with some of the other episodes, just how much depth there was. Even though I've been getting used to that, it's just like, oh my goodness, this is a grown-up show in a kid's show packaging. And I love when entertainment can do that. In a weird way, it's almost like when us as believers, when we visit the Word with an open mind and open eyes to it, instead of being like, oh, I know what this passage is talking about. It's talking about this. If you go to the Word with an open mind, God will smack you in the face lovingly with like, guess what, sucker? You had no idea this was here or this meaning or this application. And I'm not saying you'll get all that from Beast Wars, but you will get some stuff where you're like, wow, this is a lot deeper, and there's food for thought here. So I hope you do go check it out, and I hope that last part was a reminder to all of us, and especially me when I read through Scripture, to check my conclusions at the door before I get to it, and just really be open to it. Nathan, my good man, any final words?
I know you summed it up pretty well. This show is remarkable. If you can get past the dated animation, you have a wonderful 52-episode journey ahead of you. Be prepared to be invested in these characters, to start quoting half of the show because it's a highly quotable show. And to not only have a good time, but to, as we've been discussing, have some things to ponder as you go.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you you summed it up very well there. All right. Well, Jimmy, Nathan, thank you for having me back on the island. It's always a pleasure. I'm looking forward to coming back. I got to go hop Scuba. Maybe at some point we'll talk Beast Wars too, but even Scuba's like, I enjoyed it, but I'm not fully sure. So I gotta plow through it. I gotta give it more because he's such a nice guy and such a fun character that I feel I owe him a little bit more. All that being said, I hope you have a wonderful night. Stay safe. Enjoy the island. Hopefully the scary stuff in the real world is not the real world. Do you get what I mean? Like from the mainland, is staying away from the island. I gotta hop back there. Scuba's giving me a nice filtered mask for this ride, and I appreciate it.
At the moment, the island is still under another mask mandate, and let me tell you, it's not been fun. I think my microphone has to be sanitized after every broadcast because the board is nuts like that.
Yeah, I get you. All right. Well, all that being said, gentlemen, thanks for having me, and dear listeners, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of One Cross Radio, and hope you all have a wonderful day. And seriously, check out Beast Wars. I'm not sure about in the States, but in Canada, you can find it on the free streaming website Tubi. You can also pick up the DVDs They're not that expensive, and they're well worth the purchase. All that being said, hope you have a wonderful day. Take care, and God bless, my friends. Peace.
Bye-bye.